All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. It is Tuesday, the 30th day of July, and I got a lot to talk about, getting a little bit of a late start, in part because I do have so much to talk about. Prepping the show took longer than usual, and I slept later, still have a little bit of jet lag, I suppose, even though it's been about a week since I got back from Tahoe. So, forgive me for that. Indulge me, if you will, with the later start than usual. By the way, I hope to hear from you, 240-242-5646. If I get your calls, then obviously I won't get to all the topics. Some of them are kind of evergreen, unfortunately. In fact, it's sad that they are. But then I can just revisit tomorrow if I don't get to them today. And we do have Carlos coming up, friend of the show. Carlos will be joining us, Childs, that is, will be joining us Thursday. And he has a very different view of the putative Democratic nominee. She isn't definite. She hasn't got locked up sufficient votes to be determined now the Democratic nominee. But I don't think there's any question. We all know it's going to be Kamala Harris. Carlos Childs with a different take on Kamala than Arlen, who is a supporter. And a little bit, there's some nuances between Carlos' view and mine. So I'm looking forward to exploring those on Thursday with friend of the show, Carlos. But today it's just you and I. I do hope to hear from you again. That may mean I won't get to all the topics, but that's fine because I can get to them later in the week, or maybe not at all. All right, so let's start with our usual grim topic centering the plight of the Palestinian people at the hands of Israel, the genocidal state of Israel, with the full support of the United States, enabled by the United States. And in fact, my thumbnail was American-generated chaos spans the globe. I showed maps of Israel, Gaza, as well as Venezuela, because the results of the Venezuelan election are coming in, and things are really rough, really bad in Venezuela. Both sides, there's a pox on both your houses. Maduro, the president, looks like he got reelected, probably legitimately, but he's not a great guy, right? I mean, he is the leftist. He's the heir to the Chavez regime, if you want to call it that. But despite their claims, that is the Chavistas' claims to be on the side of the poor, they've clearly betrayed to a significant degree the poor, struggling, working class is in Venezuela. But of course, the right wing, they're probably worse. They're certainly no better. Those are the ones we back, and we have been efforting for years. When I say we, the United States, efforting for decades now to destabilize, to undermine the Chavez regime. And we're, because of that, by virtue of those actions, we have made things much worse in Venezuela, and probably pushed to the extent it needed a push. They needed a push the Chavez regime, the Hugo, his brother, Raul, I believe it was, and now Maduro, to be more corrupt, to be less responsive to the people of Venezuela. It's very, very sad. It's a tragedy, and I do hold the U.S. responsible in significant degrees. Both parties, bipartisan actions that have led to so much misery, so much unhappiness in Venezuela. Likewise, in Gaza, Palestine, where things are even worse. 37 more killed in the past 24 hours, according to a memo, Middle East Monitor by Israel. And that brings the overall death toll to 39,400. So the last time I reported on the death toll in Gaza was Friday. So we have seen over the past week, I had a total number, I believe it was last Tuesday, of 39,090. So 310 more killed by Israel over that week. About over 45, I think that averages out to be about 40, 45 a day. That 37, slightly below Israel's usual kill number, so we may see that rise. It's just as awful as it can be. I mean, I use the words that I have available to me. I have, I think, a pretty good vocabulary, pretty wide vocabulary, but I can't express the horror that Israel is visiting on the people of Gaza with our help, with our full support. It's so upsetting in so many different ways. There isn't really, even as far as there's no consensus whatsoever that this is just simply wrong, what Israel's doing. I see people that I used to respect, certainly who we talked yesterday, Arlen and I did about whether, how intelligent Kamala is, and Arlen says she's intelligent. I'm like, well, what are the, signs? I mean, obviously she's not a stupid person. Obviously she's, articulate. She's able to function. So she's got to be above average intelligence. But, to be smart, I mean, is she really sharp? Can she see through problems? Can she solve them? The way President Obama, President Clinton could. Now, they solve problems a lot of times to their own benefit and to the detriment of everybody else, or at least to the detriment of everybody but their inner circle and the people that they wanted to favor. I don't know that Harris is in that category in terms of intelligence. But you don't have to be smart to have sympathy, to have concern, to have empathy for the victims of this ugly, horrific violence that we are supporting. And you can be very intelligent and not give a fat rat's butt. And sadly, I have seen in the latter camp people that I've been friends, I do, very accomplished people who have achieved very, very much, and by all evidence are super bright, and they don't care. They don't care what Israel. Maybe you can explain that if you want. You want to call in and tell me, how can that be? How can people not care? But tragically, many, many don't. And it breaks my heart. You saw that, I guess. Well, as I've said on this program, I think we're better positioned now to understand what happened during the Nazi regime. Yeah, go ahead and click subscribe. Getting more viewers for sure on the live stream, which is very exciting. We'd like to see more subscribers as well. Numbers ticking up, but we'd love to see them gush up to have many, many more people watching, participating. That is in Halitics. Oh, and don't forget, the Facebook page, Halitics, the group, is a really great place to get in contact. Now, we have a very diverse group of folks. I mean, there's no political orthodoxy whatsoever in Halitics. We've got some pretty far to the right folks in there, as well as centrists, center left, and myself. So, we got a nice spirited conversation, debate going, which is what I want, as long as it's, within certain bounds. And I'll get into one post that I actually just deleted. I've almost never done that, only when there have been personal insults lodged against people in the group, or in this case, it's a different reason, and I'm going to get into that in a little bit later, why I actually took the step to delete a post. And I didn't issue any warnings or anything like that. I may have to do that if the same person posts something that I deem similarly offensive, but I want people to feel very, very free to post. But there are lines at Halitics, the group page, because I want it also to be, not that there won't, you don't need trigger warnings. You don't need to feel safe exactly. But that said, there are limits to what you can and can't say in my group on Facebook. And that's because I don't want, there's certain lines I will not, have crossed on pages which I control. So we saw the death count, 37 in the past 24 hours. And what I've in Gaza and what Israel killed. I mean, that's just, death count, call it what you want. Israel killed them. Israel killed them. Its war on Gaza continues. It's not a war with Hamas. It's a war on the human beings, the people, the children, the parents, the seniors, the women, the men of Gaza. And our caveat is always, well, we know 37, they were identified killed, but that's at least, right? That's the at least That's why I highlighted it. If you go back to the beginning of the program, you'll see I put, in blue, in a blue square at least, because many people are trapped under rubble. Are they dead? We don't know. Have they been identified? We don't know. Rescuers can't reach them. Vast tracts of Gaza lie in ruins. Crippling blockade of food, clean water, and medicine. That's what we support. That's who I voted for. I voted for Joe Biden in 2020. I voted for that. I wish I had answers. I wish I had solutions. I really don't. I mean, I will, unless, and it's becoming less and less likely, but unless Harris can convince me that she will take immediate steps to end the murders, the killing, the rampage, the laying of waste, the land theft, no, I won't vote for her. Yeah. So there are so many different ways that propaganda is being used, is being employed to color your views, for you not to see just how evil what Israel is doing is. There's so many ways that the elites, the billionaire class, those who control the media, the Israeli government, its people in this country that are all conspiring to give you a false view of what Israel is doing, so you don't recognize it for what it is, just pure, unadulterated evil. This story came to me from, because I do subscribe to the Jewish Insider, and they say if you look into the abyss, you have to be careful because the abyss also looks into you. So I read this stuff, I'll go through it, and because I want to see what the bad people are saying. I want to know what their arguments are. And when I read this headline, I was like, wow, Jewish Insider's going after the Washington Post. I mean, my gosh, that's like a cheerleader for this war. They virtually never criticize Israel. They never take on what the Zionists are doing, both here in the United States and in Israel. So, what are they talking about? Why would Jewish Insider criticize the Washington Post? So I looked into this closely, and there were several stories. They complain that the Post relies on unidentified witnesses. But this one really struck me as interesting. This criticism, why the Jewish Insider has a problem with the Washington Post. And make no mistake, if they're upset with the Washington Post, it's because the Washington Post was reporting that Israel was doing something wrong, or was reporting empathy, that they were demonstrating empathy for the Palestinian people. If Jewish Insider doesn't like the coverage, it's because they view that coverage as somehow challenging the narrative that Israel is just, Israel is moral, Israel is taking legitimate action to defend itself. So what exactly did the Washington Post report that the Jewish Insider didn't like? So according to the Jewish Insider, the Post published a story just this past May. This is relating, of course, to the campus protests that we reported quite extensively on in this channel, Halitics. Paper published a story in May suggesting it was sinister. Imagine that. It was sinister for a group of Jewish, so they prominently, this is the Jewish Insider, by the way, reporting this, that it was sinister for a group of Jewish business leaders to use their influence to advocate for New York Police Department to clear out anti-Israel protesters from Columbia University's campus. Well, first of all, it is sinister. I mean, if that's what happened, it is sinister. I don't care who's doing it. If a cabal, a small group of business leaders, rich and powerful, influential people, pressure City Hall to stop a free speech movement, to stop an anti-genocide movement, to stop a pro-democracy movement, well, yeah, that is exactly sinister. That's the right word to describe it. There's no mincing words on that. That is sinister. So if that's what the Washington Post reported, then they're right to report it, and it was sinister, and good for them. And then the insider continues, and they note that the mayor, Eric Adams, because he was the one on whom the influence was peddled, right? They peddled influence. They said to Adams, we want you to clear out the Columbia University campus, Mayor Adams. And so Adams' spokesperson, Levy, says, oh no, it was wrong for the Post. Any suggestion that other considerations were involved in the decision-making process is completely false. I don't know what, they're not clear what those considerations were, but I guess what they're saying is that when the mayor made his decision, he just did it without regard to what these billionaire donors were trying to get him to do. By the way, Jewish donors, at least as they are described by the Jewish Insider. And they use that to imply that the Washington Post was being anti-Semitic. Oh, these Jewish plotters, right? It's a trope, according to the Washington. It's a trope, according to the Jewish Insider, that the Washington Post is using. Okay, so what really happened was that a bunch of billionaires who are Jewish in New York pressured Eric Adams to crack down on the protesters, to crack heads, to crack skulls, to stop it. They didn't like it. They didn't like what was happening on the college campus, and they pressured Adams to stop it. So the Washington Post got it exactly right. And in fact, it was sinister. And yet somehow the truth, at least according to the Jewish Insider, can be spun, at least the way they try to spin it, to look like the newspaper, the Washington Post, is anti-Semitic, is I don't know what. Is bigots. They're bigots. They're not credible. In fact, what the Jewish Insider is trying to do is discredit the truth, discredit the story, get you to not, just reject it. Say, oh, I can't believe that. It was, even if it's true, it doesn't matter because the motive, right? The Post's motive is to cast aspersions on Jews. This is absolute indictment that you, me, we should be outraged. The fact is, we should be absolutely outraged. A group of billionaires, literal billionaires, there's a few hundred on the planet. A group of them, and I guess New York probably has the highest number, right, of any city, I gotta believe, live in New York. By far, right? What would even be close? Maybe London, maybe LA. I doubt it. Business titans privately urged New York City mayor to use police on Columbia protesters. Chat show. So the Post gets access to this WhatsApp chat, presumably because one of the people involved was disgusted by it. Maybe somebody in the mayor's office leaked it. I don't really know. They leak it to the Post, and it's very, very clear what's going on. A shadowy group of super rich, super influential people who have a direct, hotline to the mayor, pressed him to disperse, to arrest, to knock heads the pro-Palestine, the anti-genocide protests at Columbia University. So this tells us we don't live in a democracy, obviously, that our government leaders are responding to a tiny group of billionaires. They're not respecting democratic norms. They're not respecting the First Amendment. They're not respecting anything. They're not respecting morality. That's what's going on here. But the Jewish Insider sees anti-Semitism in the reportage. It's interesting, they complained as the Insider that the billionaires, they keep saying Jewish billionaires. Well, they were. And I don't have the names, but they're in the article. They're never identified as Jewish. The Washington Post never says they're Jewish. They just identify them by name. And as far as I can tell, they are Jewish, but I don't know. Maybe they're not. But that's not the point. It's not whether they're Jewish. The point is that billionaires who are super pro-Zionist, regardless of their religion, are controlling the New York City Police Department. It's not there to protect and serve the public. It's there to do the bidding of billionaires. And the chat group, I guess the one who leaked it, members paid for private investigators to assist the police to go in. So they have a private force, right? Like the Pinkertons in the 19th century, early 20th century, breaking up strikes, shooting at protesters. And there's a real advantage for the police when that happens, because first of all, then the police don't have to get their hands as dirty, A, and B, if it's a private force, they're not subject to the protections. They're not limited in terms of what actions they can take by the Constitution. Court has ruled, private, they can deprive people of their constitutional rights. They can lock people up improperly. They can, beat people up without violating their due process rights because it's not the police. Now, they might be subject to liability for other reasons, but it'd be much harder to sue them. And according to the WhatsApp group, Adam said, we'll take your help. We'll take those private eyes to go in. It's really an extraordinary story. Jewish Insider doesn't want you to know that. And they want you to disregard it if you learn of it. Interesting, isn't it? And depressing, unfortunate. I wish I had a solution. So the solution isn't, unless I'm very mistaken, I know Arlen says give her a chance, right? She's had chances. Her chances, she's bungled. She's blown. She had a chance to reduce prison overpopulation in California. Instead, she defended it. There were several folks in jail, a number, who credibly were not afforded fair trials. Harris repeatedly fought against new trials. She fought against the introduction of exculpatory evidence in cases that were still, before the courts. She simply has not sided with poor, struggling, working people. She has not sided with the victims of a rapacious capitalist system, or for that matter, American empire. So I don't have a lot of optimism for her. I'm not going to read tea leaves and say, she said ceasefire first. I go by this statement.
So I just had a frank and constructive meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu. I told him that I will always ensure that Israel is able to defend itself, including from Iran and Iran-backed militias such as Hamas and Hezbollah. From when I was a young girl collecting funds to plant trees for Israel, to my time.
Right, so I don't want to hear all her wonderful, she was planting trees, but she opens, and even that context is interesting, what Harris did there, because the first thing she says, she's supposed to be the one who in the administration is sort of the tough cop, the bad cop. She's going to tell Netanyahu what's what. She's going to read him the Riot Act. No more genocide, right? That's what we're supposed to believe. Of course, that's not what she's saying even when she's in a press conference. The first thing she says is, I'll always have your back. I'll always make sure Israel has the means to protect itself. And Israel's not protecting itself. Israel's committing genocide. It's not protecting itself. But she doesn't even pivot from saying, hey, we'll always be there to protect Israel, but in this case, they're not. They don't need protection. They need to be stopped. She doesn't say, oh no, when I was a child, I was planting trees for Israel. That's not acceptable. This is a time of genocide. It's not acceptable in 1940, in 1938, to talk about how you have this great love for Germany. That's just not appropriate under the circumstances. The victims are not Israelis. The victims in 1938-39 were not Germans. Those countries are the victimizer. Unless there's a complete course correction, no, I cannot support her. Yeah, so I hear this. I wish you'd put up start time of next show by 8 a.m. Your start times are all over. I apologize for that. I have to do better on that. My goal here is, this is from the chat, my goal has been to be consistent at noon. There were a lot of stories I wanted to get to today. I did a lot of prep work. I won't get to all of them for sure, but I wanted to at least have them ready. And it took me longer than, it could possibly be ready at noon. I almost was ready at 1, but not quite. So I do apologize for that. Also, I slept late. I mentioned the jet lag, right? I'm still thinking I'm going through that a little bit. But I will strive. All I can do is promise to do better. I do the best I can. Thank you for being concerned, and thank you for listening and watching live. PT, mea culpa. We can't expect. We know. We cannot reasonably believe that Kamala Harris will stop the genocide, that she will take action against Israel, that she will effectuate the necessary course correction. What I hoped for, my personal journey, and I started the radio station back in 2005. The goal was to make a real political difference, to change who's elected. I don't see ultimately any way to make things better except to do that. And when I was in California with a radio station, I also thought there was a real business opportunity. There just wasn't progressive talk. People would say, oh, there's NPR. NPR's not progressive. NPR's controlled by the underwriters, big corporations. So there was no way that would be the solution, and it's clearly not been. But I thought, well, there's this Air America, there are these new hosts, they seem pretty good, they're progressive, they're funny, they're talented. I want to be in on that. I want to be part of that. They don't have a lot of traction. Maybe I can make a real difference. And I thought we were making a difference. We actually did get some pretty progressive people in my first few years in California. Some pretty progressive folks were elected, especially locally. And Barack Obama in 2008. 3 years after I started the station. And I was like a big fan. I really believe in Barack Obama. I believe in President Obama. I thought we were making a difference. And, pretty quickly I was disillusioned. So my next thought after I sold the radio station, because business just never, it didn't take off. That was one of my hugest disappointments. We had some decent years early on, but in the end, the economy was not good for radio, for media, really, for legacy media. I don't even know if it's good for new media. I don't know if some of the websites that have blown up have done very, very well, but many have not. I believe Salon is on fumes, and many other, there was another relatively progressive website that I think really has struggled. I don't know all the details. The Vox guy made a mint, Ezra Klein. So, some did well, some did not do as well. My thought was, hey, I'll get involved in some progressive organizing. We'll work at the grassroots level. Not going to start another radio station. I did some live streaming. But in the end, this has been such a disappointment as well. The progressive groups, ultimately, that I'm associated with, that I've been associated with, have simply been unwilling to take on the Democratic Party. They view themselves ultimately as appendages of the Democratic Party. They are not going to challenge the party, not aggressively, not to the degree necessary, not to the point where they say, I'm not going to be part of the Democratic Party anymore. So here, or we're going to support someone other than the Democrat. So here's the PDA presidential straw poll. And it's not just I got this yesterday. It's not just the leadership in those groups, although I certainly hold them responsible. But I was really looked at this poll and I could not, and I participated in it. I'm not going to show, but I'll just show. They got a lot of people who voted, who said, hey, who am I going to support? And just about every single vote. I'm going to show you just 2 pages. I put 12 on each one. Blocked out the names because I don't, even though it is public and you put your name down, presumably you don't care. I'm not going to show names without their explicit approval. But here's 6. Every single, and there's about 20 pages of 6 at least, maybe more. Every name on this page, Kamala Harris. There's not even an undecided. And you had other choices. I actually voted for Jill Stein. You had other choices. Every single one, Kamala Harris. It's quite extraordinary. There's simply no appetite, no willingness. Here's page 2. This was recent. Cornel West. One person wrote Cornel West, which I have to be honest, disappoints me. I'm like, where have you been? Cornel West. I mean, yeah, he's better than Harris, I guess. Yeah. But that's not a movement. PDA presents itself, a Progressive Democrats America presents itself as a movement. Cornel West is running as an independent, as an individual. He's actually on the ballot in Colorado as part of a kind of a libertarian group. So, I mean, there's just a failure in my view to think long-term, to think strategically, to think how are we going to build the movement? And the movement builders, so-called, all they can do is just repeat the same old tired tropes. Well, we got to change the Democratic Party from the inside and the outside. We've got to pressure the Democratic Party. We've got to hold the Democratic Party accountable. But there's zero plan or strategy to do that. Nor are there tactics. There was a tactic. So this group I worked for, and I'm not, this is not to slam them. I mean, I think they do the best they can. I don't have any negative, anger towards our revolution. I wish their CEO would come on my program. I've asked him. He doesn't, he ignores me. But he knows I'll ask him tough questions. I said to him, hey, I want to know why you've endorsed AOC. He's not going to want to answer that because I'm going to follow up. I'm going to follow up. I'm going to say, look, she platformed these Zionists. She hasn't platformed the victims of Israeli genocide, but she platforms people who say that if you criticize Israel, you're a racist, you're an anti-Semite. She endorsed Joe Biden back in January. She fought against replacing Joe Biden. Why are you endorsing him? He doesn't want that question. He's not going to answer it. So he's not going to come on my program. I think that's very disappointing. I think those are important questions that should be answered. But regardless, there's really no, they championed, they did champion the uncommitted vote. That has had zero impact, no effect, nothing. It's done nothing to change what the government's doing. You aren't going to replace a Joe Biden with nobody. You're not going to replace a Kamala Harris on the ticket with nobody, and she's not going to be replaced. You're not going to beat her with nobody. The only way to win is you have a candidate who's on your side, who you trust, who has demonstrated that they're truly progressive. And there are people out there, but nope. PDA, all in for Kamala, one vote for West. And by the way, that was like the only non-Harris vote I saw. I mean, I went through a bunch of pages. I didn't really feel like copying all of them. It was a lot of work. That was the only non-vote for the non-Harris vote, except for my vote for Jill Stein. And if you look through that list, you can find it, I'm sure, online. John Voter is me. That's who voted for Stein. So here, our revolution, Bernie's now all in for Kamala. They're so limited. They can't, these so-called progressive groups, these so-called grassroots organizations, Bernie started our revolution. They can't see past the left side of the Democratic Party, which isn't very far to them. And if you look at this survey that they put together, I think it just shows how cramped, how constricted their vision is, how they cannot win. So trying to push Harris to the left, they have come up with this at our revolution. And by the way, it's all done to raise funds as well. And if you want to give them money, go ahead. That's on you. But I want to see impact, right? If I'm going to give money to a group, I want to know what they're doing. What are their successes? Or at least what are they striving? What is their end game? So it's just something to keep in mind. So how important is it for Harris to support these initiatives? Medicare expansion, well, she supports that. Dental, vision, hearing benefits, so cramped. When I joined our revolution, we were for Medicare for all. That was non-negotiable. Medicare expansion is okay. It's not enough. Every American from cradle to grave should have health care, period. End of story. Free at the point of delivery. They've backtracked from that. They won't even go that far. Trump talked about Medicare for all in his first campaign. Can't even support that. What about this? Climate change, end fossil fuel subsidies and take bold climate action. Okay. The fossil fuel subsidies are pretty de minimis. They're a problem. We shouldn't have them. I agree with that. And take bold climate action is meaningless. What? Green New Deal? The solution has to be to make fossil fuel prices much, much higher. That's the only way you're going to keep it in the ground. Only way. Can't even bestir themselves to say that. By the way, I know it's a tough sell. I'm going to get into that maybe later in the program. If not tomorrow, I'm going to talk about the challenge that we face on the left. And very few, by the way, virtually nobody's saying we need to end fossil fuel subsidies. But except for, people are saying that. No one except for me is saying we need to tax fossil fuels. But that's the solution. It has to become much, much, much more expensive relative to every other option out there. Talk about why that's such an impossible task. By the way, it's impossible because the fossil fuel corporations recognize this. They don't like the Green New Deal, I'm sure. And I know, apparently ExxonMobil is feeling a little bit of a pinch from all those electric cars. But these are very diversified companies. They sell fossil fuels all over the place to everybody. So yeah, they don't love the electric cars. Those are making a bit of a difference, but it's more the gas station owners, the small business owners that are feeling the pinch from the e-vehicles, not so much giant integrated oil, gas, coal companies. Otherwise, they wouldn't be out there drilling, doing more and more exploration. If they really were concerned about a reduction in consumption, they wouldn't be applying for new permits, building new facilities, adding to the pipeline capacity. The only solution is you have to make it relatively much more expensive than alternatives. But back to where our evolution and PDA are so limited in their thinking. PDA can't see beyond Kamala Harris. Our evolution, what Harris should support. Bernie and Biden's plan for a national 5%. So it's a Biden plan for 5% rent cap and building more affordable housing. I like that, right? It's better than not having anything. but it's still so limited, more affordable. Every American deserves housing as a human right. That should be the starting point. And then you absolutely, beyond raising the taxes on fossil fuels, you have to reduce wealth and income inequality. The reason we don't have housing built for poor, struggling, and especially working class people is because there's so much money in the hands of a few people, and it's so much more profitable to build houses for them. And everyone else has so little. The middle class barely exists. But if the middle class were vibrant, were strong, you'd have more housing built for it. That's not mentioned. They don't care about it. The actual nuts and bolts of redistributing wealth from the top down is something that so-called progressive groups can no longer do. They're not willing to even try. Okay. I see some more comments in the chat. I just can't really get to them. I'm sorry. Ceasefire in Gaza and end to endless wars. Yeah, I'm good with that again, but it's not nearly enough. We should just stop the empire, period. They're limited. It's just so limited. Universal child care, funding for universal child care. Yeah, okay. There's so many other expenses associated with having children. But okay, I mean, some of these are good ideas. I'm not saying these progressive groups don't do anything good. I'm saying they're limited. I'm saying they're ultimately not ready or able or willing to take on concentrated wealth power in any meaningful, effective, impactful way. Campaign finance reform. Yeah, I support campaign. I think that's really important. Big money is so toxic. But even campaign finance reform, public financing is good. The ultimate answer has to be reducing wealth and income inequality. You can take out the influence of money in politics to a degree. People can't buy elections to a degree. But again, that's going to require a new Supreme Court as well. But the influence is always going to be, there's always going to be the idea, hey, I got a golden parachute. I do the bidding. I don't think Barack Obama was not elected based on money. I mean, he raised a lot of money, but he had a lot of small donors too. He had the ability to be independent. He had a very strong independent base. And yet, you see at the end of his second term, he moved forcibly in support of positions that the oil and gas concerns wanted. And he got his payday when he left office. So it wasn't a question of them buying his seat. He won despite the preferences of the oil and gas and fossil fuel lobby, which would have chosen Hillary Clinton, as they did in 2016. But Obama still saw, look at all that money out there. Look at that pile of money at Carlyle Group. I'll go speak to them and take it. So the real solution has to be forcible redistribution of wealth from the rich by much higher taxes. Democratic organizations, progressive organizations, I mean, they support it, I suppose, but they're not going to build a movement around that, and yet that's what we need. Yeah, no, these are all nice. I mean, I don't have a problem with it. And where's the strategy? How are we going to get there? All right, 240, by the way, 240, let's see, what is it? 242-5646, join me. 240-242-5646. I told you a lot of stories. I mentioned early on that I had deleted a post that was on the Halitics, in the Halitics group. And I didn't like to do it. I wasn't happy about it. It wasn't my preferred thing to do. But and I had seen this, and it made me, I didn't delete it originally, but then I got an email from somebody who brought it to my attention and said, hey, this is racist. And I thought, yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, I just will not, there's a limit, right? This crosses the line. I'll show it because I want people to understand what my thought was, what my thinking was. But yeah, this is not acceptable. So this is mocking And by the way, I don't disagree that white dudes, and I guess there were black women, I don't know, all these different, like Harris, there's an article in the New York Times about this. I think it's terrible. The way the Harris administration is trying to appeal to all these different discrete identity groups, not pushing policies that will make life better for poor, struggling, and working people who are disproportionately of color. No, it's, white dudes, blah, blah. So this post suggests, and I looked it up because I really was trying to understand. I was having trouble with it for a while. And I think this cartoonist is very closely associated with a lot of kind of edgy, in a bad way, stuff, that either skirts or crosses the line into racism, sexism, misogyny, that kind of thing. So when I see these cartoons, this style, my antenna go up. But when I first saw it, I was like, I don't even know. I didn't really fully understand it. But then when it was brought to my attention by one of my faithful, I looked it up and I saw, the original, this was sort of taken from another meme, which is the idea, like the cuck, right? The man. This is like a big thing, this cuck idea, that a man who likes to see their wife having sex with another man, like they're like the lowest kind of person. So this is suggesting that white dudes for Harris really get off on seeing their wives having sex with a black man, right? Because like the figure that she's in having sex with is black. And it I'm somebody who tries not to always see anti-Semitism for sure. I often, people say, oh, that's anti-Semitic. I'm like, I don't think so. I don't see that. I don't think criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic. I don't think the guy who said, what did he say? I want to kill Zionists. I don't even think that's anti-Semitic. Maybe they're motivated by anti-Semitism, but the statement itself is not anti-Semitic, in my opinion. But this is clearly just ugly stuff, right? I mean, there's just no question. They're saying, well, the only reason if you were white, a man, you support Harris is because you really get off on seeing your wife with a black man. So, if I wanted to make some sort of defense of this, I suppose I could, but I'm not going to. It doesn't have any redeeming value. If you don't like Kamala Harris, you have a million arguments you can make. You can talk about her record. You can talk about her challenge, how she's public speaking challenge. She's not a good public speaker. You can make fun of her cackle. I don't think that's very effective. I don't think that's a good argument. I mean, she laughs the way she laughs. But you could do it. But to make the claim, and I'm a white guy, I don't like Kamala Harris. I'm not for Kamala Harris. But I'm not going to say that white guys who support her are doing it because they're some weird sex thing going on, that they want to see their wives, with another man who happens to be black. So, that doesn't help. That kind of a meme puts us at each other's throats. It doesn't elucidate, it doesn't illuminate, and it does absolutely traffic in all sorts of stereotypes, racist stereotypes. So that I'm not going to allow. It's just that simple. And I get, I wasn't going to go there. I had this up yesterday, but just to be totally fair about this, I wanted to show a meme that I was going to display yesterday, and I didn't get to, didn't have time, with Arlen, where I was going to question whether this is helpful, whether this is useful at all. So let me see, I'm looking over to the side. You can see me looking over to the side. So I was going to ask Arlen about this. I wouldn't strike this the way I struck, or I deleted the one I showed you before, with the white dude for Harris supposedly wanting to see his wife with a black man. But to me, this is very problematic as well. I wouldn't strike it because I don't think it's overtly racist, but it absolutely is divisive. So the white guy says to the woman of color, how does it feel to be hired just because of race and gender? And she responds with, you tell me. So she's saying, well, you got where you are because you're a white man, so don't start in on me for being where I am because I'm a black woman or a woman of color. This is not helpful, folks. This is not helpful. So I saw someone write DEI for white men means didn't earn it. Well, some did and some didn't. It's not helpful. What we need to do is unite poor, struggling, and working people, period, across race, sex, gender lines. This does just the opposite. These kind of posts, just like the one I showed earlier, they do just the opposite. They pit us against each other based on race, sex, and gender lines. You know what? The billionaire class, they're laughing all the way to the bank. Every time they see one of those on Facebook, whether it's by a righty, a lefty, somebody in between, they're laughing all the way to the friggin' bank. And we're the victims of it. All right, I want to get to this final story. I actually have more than just this, but Venezuela is a lot in the news, right? Because they just had this election and it looks like, or at least the winner declared is Nicolas Maduro, who is the successor to the Chavez's first Hugo, and I think was his brother Raul. Did I get that right? I don't even know. Raul. I think it's Raul Chavez. I believe. I'm looking that up. Yes. No. There is a Raul Chavez, but that's not who it is. So let me look it up because I don't want to get this wrong. Maybe it was. Was it Raul? Oh. Huh. Hugo, Aiden. Wow. I thought there was. Huh. I'm thinking through this. I'm going to look him up right now because I want to see who his successor was. I thought it was another Chavez. Successor, Rafael, succeeded by Pedro Carmona, acting, but then I thought there was another. Wasn't there another Chavez? Then Cabello. Then Maduro. So I guess there was no other. Huh. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about here. So sure there was another Chavez who ran Venezuela. I guess there was another Castro. It was Raul Castro. So I got it. That's how I got confused. I believe there was a Raul Castro, right? He took over, but there was no. Raul Castro. So apologies for getting that wrong. I'm glad I was able to clarify that. Maduro was a successor. He's one of the Chavista, I guess, regime, Chavismo. And people are, up in arms. There's a lot of rioting. There's a real question of, at least the question is being presented by the elites in Venezuela, that is being pushed by them, and it's being amplified by American media that the election was stolen. And you see how the New York Times says, some say just stolen election. So a movement started by Chavez promising power to the people became an authoritarian regime, one that opponents say just stolen election. So I'm very skeptical. The New York Times says it's authoritarian. I'm not going to necessarily believe it, especially if it's a leftist regime, especially if, as she said, they're practicing land reform, taking power and influence away from the billionaire class, if they're opposed by the military. I'm tending to be much more sympathetic to a leftist or quasi-leftist or putative leftist regime like Chavez and now Maduro. I thought Bloomberg had what I consider to be a fair headline, or at least they present the other side. The New York Times is saying this is all in the past day or two. The New York Times is saying that some are accusing them of election theft. The Maduro regime goes the other way, and this is Bloomberg saying Maduro regime accuses rival of sabotage triggering protests. But they don't arrest Machado. She's the actual rival who is running against Maduro is Gonzalez, But the power behind Gonzalez is Machado. And she has a long and ignoble relationship with the United States. And for you to, there she is. Let me show you. So there she is meeting with George W. Bush back in 2005. She was allegedly, according to Gray Zone, close to Elliot Abrams. She was working with the CIA, working with the Bush regime, and perhaps even before then, the W. Bush regime, to destabilize Venezuela, to seize power back from Chavez, who had been democratically elected. So that's who we're backing. That's who we support. And it certainly doesn't make us look good in any way. She was part of a coup attempt. Maria Corina Machado was part of a coup attempt back in 2019. And there you can see, this is finally where I went to try to get to where I could understand what was going on in Venezuela. So yeah, Corina Machado was part of a coup attempt. Let me see if I can get the better cut. This is from the Wall Street Journal. 2019, what the hell is going on? How a tiny cabal. So these are not populist leaders. She's the one who led that opposition, Corina Machado. She's a, just a U.S. I don't want to say a puppet. She's a U.S. putative dictator herself, a tyrant, someone who maybe, I don't know, wants to be Eva Perón, wants to take control of Venezuela. And so she was part of a secret group in 2019 that tried very, very desperately to take control of Venezuela and failed. She had the backing of the U.S. government. So a foreign power was working, she was working with a foreign power to seize control. Think of what the Democrats, how much hay they made out of the false claim that Donald Trump was working with a foreign power, Russia. There's no question that Corina Machado was working with the United States, which has done everything possible to undermine the Chavez regime, including crippling sanctions, embargoes, various efforts, again, to subvert turn the military against Chavez. So the opposition, they're bad people. They're bad people in Venezuela. Tragically, so is the power. So is Maduro. And I was really trying to understand this because I've heard a lot, and the fact that there's so much corruption, there's a lot of corruption in this Maduro government. So American media uses that. It runs with it. The American neocon establishment runs with this. They're like, how can you be for Maduro? Look at how bad he is. Well, look at the opposition. You're not interested in democracy. You're not interested when you say those on the right or those in power. When you argue that Maduro is so bad, you're not interested in replacing him with a pro-working class, with a pro-people president. You just want your own puppet. You want someone who's going to be completely, comfortable with working with American foreign corporations, giving the resources of Colombia over, or rather of Venezuela over to them. So both sides are terrible. And I think this World Socialist website does a pretty good job of explaining it. First of all, saying, no, look, he did win. Maduro won. It was close, and we'll get to that in a little bit, But yeah, the numbers when they came in showed he won by about 7%. Not a blowout, but yes, Maduro wins. And then they note that in the original reporting, there was no immediate claim that the election had been stolen. In fact, the observer said, this is what the people wanted. I was watching a video with Anya I think it's Parampil, and Max Blumenthal on the Gray Zone. And she said before the election returns came in, she was sure that Maduro would win because he has the support of the poor and workers in Venezuela. And they far outnumber the middle class and the elites who supported Gonzalez, Corina Machado. So I was like, okay, well, that's what these results show. And in fact, again, the results were closer. Parampil is her name, Anya Parampil. But the results were relatively closer than Anya Parampil had predicted, but still where she said they would be, which is that Maduro would prevail. World Social's website agrees. Yeah, he probably won. It doesn't look like there was, the count was rigged or anything like that. But they're not defending Maduro. Look at what they write. And I find this, and this, by the way things are in Venezuela are so bad. So much poverty, need. It does point a way forward for us. It's not to destabilize a democratically elected president. It's not to foment a coup. It's not to claim that the election was stolen. But it is to acknowledge that, yes, Maduro is unpopular. As World Social's website says, the fact that an unknown stand-in for Machado, a creature of the CIA, that's Machado, an extreme right-winger, could plausibly have defeated Maduro. And they're saying, yeah, it's only 7%. It's a plausible argument. This indicts the entire Bolivarian project and the pink tide regionally. And they say pink because they're really hard left. I mean, they want communism. They want worker control, period. And then they go into, and I don't buy everything they say. I don't agree with everything, but that's true, right? I mean, the people of Venezuela are stuck between two terrible options. Corrupt Maduro and U.S. puppet militarist Machado, hand-picked Machado person, Gonzalez. And they say, look what Chavez did. He, rather than governing as a true worker president, he definitely promoted the oil industry in Venezuela. And rather than distributing the wealth that came from exploiting oil and also, the harm that it caused, he didn't distribute it. He gave it out to his friends, his allies. Now, part of that, I'm reading that, I'm thinking, well, what else has he got to do? He's got to somehow maintain power. He's under constant attack by the United States. So this is the way he circles the wagons. I'm not excusing it, but I'm explaining what I think was part of this. Again, the real answer should have been, would have been, could have been the U.S. works with Chavez and says, hey, we get it. Your country is poor. Part of that is because of our multinational corporations exploiting your resources. Part of it is our military backing them. We're going to stop doing that. Nobody says that in the United States. So we put leaders like Chavez, who may, at the beginning, have had some good intention. But rather than working with them, trying to promote the well-being of their country, we did everything possible to subvert Venezuela. And so, of course, they become hardened in their and their actions and their corruption. I thought this was a really good point that the World Socialist website said. Right now, U.S. imperialism is really weakened, right? We're fighting all these proxy wars against Gaza, to kill the Gazan people, against Russia. We're weakened. We're not viewed as the good guys anymore. There was a real opening in Venezuela for true pro-people movement, an anti-capitalist movement, corporate movement. But Maduro wants no part of that. And guess who else wants no part of that? Apparently, the Democratic Party. Even progressive Democrats, they're not prepared to take on Democratic elites. They're not prepared to move on. I don't know. I don't have any answers. There's so many other issues we have to deal with. The endless war is such a serious problem. I'm just talking about that. The imperialism, they all go hand in hand. Our exploitation of the environment. Story out of the Great Lakes region is just heartbreaking as the fish are dying off there. All this is impacting so much more hard on, or maybe just on the people below the top. And yet they're also being exploited into supporting these injustices. I'll talk about that more tomorrow, but the kind of actions that both parties in this country, the two major parties, engage in, proxy wars, exploiting natural resources, all but enslaving workers in poorer countries, they make everyone, we're all to a degree complicit. And to a degree, we benefit from those, at least some of those practices as well. We've got to figure out a way to turn our back on this and to forcefully demand justice for ourselves and around the world. You got any solutions, answers, let me know. But I can tell you this, saying you're going to vote for Kamala Harris, that ain't going to do it.